and taken away. We want to give you more information and context tonight about this church, a historic church with a rich history there in Charleston, Emmanuel AME. Steve Singleton is a former pastor there. He has been kind enough to join us live on the phone tonight. Pastor Singleton, just share with me the emotions, the heartbreak you must be feeling right now.
This is shocking. The more I think about this, the more speechless I become. This is way above and beyond anything I could have imagined. And we hear about these stories in faraway places, but I'm still in contact with many of the members there. They're still my friends, and I am just in prayer for the healing of that congregation, for the families, and for the heart of and the spirit of the church. That's about where I am right now.
Well, let me say our prayers and condolences are with you. We can only imagine how you and that entire congregation are feeling tonight. For our viewers who are just joining us, the police chief is not ready to confirm it at this hour, but we can tell you that NBC News is confirming that the pastor of that church, the current pastor, Reverend Clemente Pinckney, who is also a state senator, died in that shooting tonight. Reverend Singleton, talk to me about Reverend Pinckney and about your church family there at Emmanuel AME.
Well, Reverend Pinckney was a statesman, a member of our legislature, which made him a very good fit for that congregation. A lot of historical pride. They embraced that kind of reputation and atmosphere, and I'm sure that I can't describe it, but they're so united because of the bond and the pride that they have. This is going to be so shocking. I'm sure the whole landscape of that congregation and the atmosphere with that congregation will change forever. But Reverend Pinckney was a fine representative of that congregation, a fine representative of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. And my heart and my prayers go out to the families as well.
Emmanuel AME dates back, I believe, to 1822. I know Denmark Vesey was one of the church's founders. Talk to me about the history of that church, because we may see as this story unfolds that perhaps has some role in what we saw unfold there tonight.
Well, it's the third oldest AME church in the world, and it is the oldest AME church in the southern hemisphere of the United States. Because of the history of Denmark Vesey's membership and being a part of the early days of that congregation, it is a very popular historic tourist attraction in the city of Charleston. And I don't know, what the motivation shooter, but yes, it's definitely a place of black pride, religious pride, and so that could very well be a part of what they're calling a hate crime. I wouldn't be surprised if it's determined to be that. Mm-hmm.
Well, and Denmark Vesey, of course, when we read our history books, know that he organized a major slave uprising in Charleston, and there's just a lot of history there for the African American community that really makes this story so much more difficult for people there to take in.
And, Charleston is, as we all know, very historic, not only on the local level, but statewide and nationally and internationally. When I was there, we had visitors from around the world all the time just pop in and, sharing our services because they had heard about Emmanuel AME Church. And And it is correct that Mark Vesey was so involved that when the, I can't think of a word, but when the word got out that he was planning the insurrection, he had to move. In fact, the church where it stands today is not where it was then. That church was rebuilt in the, if I remember correctly, I want to misquote my dates, but that church was rebuilt after slavery was ended, and they built that large, beautiful, majestic sanctuary as a source of pride that African Americans could build a church with that kind of architecture and all of the majestic design that other churches had. And so yes, they took a lot of pride in what they were doing back then, and that pride remains to this day.
Well, I tell you what, we actually have a photograph of Reverend Pinckney standing, I believe, inside of that church. And I hope we can show it to our viewers because it is a beautiful sanctuary. And I just cannot imagine that beautiful, religious, serene setting being marred by the violence of this night. But I tell you what, we have already seen evidence tonight that it is a praying community there because they had a prayer vigil on the streets and they had a circle of prayer with some pastors on the street there. So you can tell that it's a community of strong faith, but that's this is still going to be a terribly difficult time to get through.
Well, I mean, but when things like this happen, it drives people to their faith. And if it doesn't, it means that you didn't have any in the first place. Because for people who believe and follow God, they know that there's no place to go now but to God. And put it at His feet because it's too much for us to handle.
Well, I'm glad that you touched on that because it is in times like these that we find ourselves asking questions. Why? Why does this kind of a thing happen? Why does it happen at a church, at a prayer meeting?
Right.
How do you answer those questions and reconcile that? Because, you want to believe that you're a person of faith and, so many people say they believe in the power of prayer, but things like this can shake your faith.
Well, it can if you limit your faith to your own personal desires. And by no means will I ever say that this is God's will. In fact, this kind of development is an indication of the presence of evil. And sometimes when people are debating the existence of God, many times I remind them that it's a whole lot easier to believe that there's an evil force in this world. And this is one of those developments that I think prove that. But that being said, the answer I give is not why, but what do we do now? And we have to know that God brings us through our tragedies. God doesn't bring the tragedy to us. He brings us through the tragedies that we have to go through. And that's a part of our existence. And if you want to dig to the root of our faith, then you have to think about the fallen state of humanity because the things that are happening in the world today, it just boggles the mind. And you have to know that, humanity is broken. We're wounded. And this is one of those things that just came close to home. But there's hatred and brutality all over the world. And I believe that people who really love God, our heart breaks because this is not God's desire for us. Well, I believe, and many believers believe, that God's desire for us is for us to be joyful, to be healthy, to be happy, and yet the presence of evil continues, if you will, its mission, I guess, against everything that's good. But people of faith will dig in, and we will take this to God and leave it with Him because we know we're too weak to handle it. But God can get us through it.
Well, they are, as you say, digging in and taking it to God tomorrow because the elder who was there on the scene tonight with Police Chief Mullen and Mayor Riley, let us know that they are holding a prayer vigil tomorrow, and they want everybody who could hear the sound of his voice to show up there and join them in prayer, to pray for peace, to pray for safety, and to pray for this suspect to be brought to justice. Quite frankly, a lot of people there uneasy tonight, now learning that the suspect is still on the loose.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm just a tough time down there right now.
It is indeed. I know that you have been so kind with your time, but before we let you go, I do want to give you an opportunity to talk about Reverend Pinckney. We shared with our viewers earlier this evening that he was born July 30th, 1973, the son of John Pinckney and the late Theopia Stevenson Pinckney of Ridgeland, South Carolina, and one of the youngest African-American legislators to be elected to the South Carolina legislature, the House of Representatives in 1996 at the age of 23, and in 2000 elected to the state Senate at the age of 27. So many people heartbroken tonight to hear NBC confirm that he was in fact killed in this shooting. But please share with us and talk a little bit about the dynamic, the passionate man that you knew him to be.
Well, you know, he had a heart for politics. He was a very young man, of course. And I remember when he ran for office the very first time, and of course there was a whole lot of talk about how young he was and was he really up to the task of public service. But he proved himself worthy. Always involved with civic matters, being an advocate for the people, for the citizens of his district, made the transition to the Senate, and likewise the same thing. He used to bring a lot of information from the legislature back to the AME Church and the citizens who wanted to know what was going on in committees and how that would affect their lives. So he was always a public servant, as he filled the role of a servant of God, and he was living proof that to serve God is to also serve God's people, and he did that, and he did it well, and his family should be proud of his legacy, and we just thank God for the time we did have with him, and we're believing that God is going to bring something good out of all of this. But that's his legacy, and it's something to be proud of.
Well, I want to share a couple of new comments that we have received. Senator Tim Scott sending this statement tonight saying, "This senseless tragedy at a place of worship where we come together to laugh, love, and rejoice in God's name is despicable and cannot be understood." We are also hearing from Joe Wilson tonight, who says he is praying for the victims, the families, and the entire Charleston community. Reverend Stevenson, what do you want to say to your church congregation there tonight?
I want to say that there are a lot of raw emotions, especially in the Charleston area right now, especially in the AME Church right now. I want to say to everybody to seek God for peace. We understand the emotions, we understand the anger. We may even understand a desire for some kind of quick justice, but that would only perpetuate more problems. And I want to encourage everybody to pray for peace, to pray for healing, and in spite of what the shooter intended to do, let us live above it, let us live beyond it, and let him know, as the Bible says, no weapon formed against us shall prosper. And even though he carried out this heinous crime, God still has the last word on every episode in our lives.
Well, I tell you what, stand by for us for just a moment, because I do have at least one other question I want to ask you, but I want to share